You were not brought to this message by accident, not by an algorithm, not by a passing scroll, not by idle curiosity. Something deeper moved through the noise of your day and placed you exactly here, at exactly this moment. And if you are honest with yourself, some part of you already knows that. You have known it for a while now, that quiet sense beneath the surface of your ordinary life that you are not ordinary, that the things you have been carrying, the waiting, the wondering, the almost but not quite moments have not been random suffering. They have been preparation, and the preparation, chosen one, is complete. Before this month ends, God needs you to receive one thing, not 10 things, not a list of disciplines or a system of habits. One thing, and that one thing is not information. It is not motivation. It is a knowing that drops below the level of your thoughts and settles into your bones. A knowing that says the season you have been surviving is not your permanent address. What you are about to receive in the next few minutes is not something you are hearing for the first time. It is something you have always known but needed someone to say out loud in plain language without flinching. So let me be that voice for you today. You are not like everyone around you, and you have always felt that. Not in arrogance, not in pride, but in that quiet disorientation of someone who keeps looking at the crowd and thinking, I love these people, but I do not belong in this pattern. You dream differently. You grieve differently. You feel things at a depth that other people do not seem to reach, and sometimes that depth has felt like a burden. Sometimes it has felt like a flaw. I want you to hear me very clearly right now. Was never a flaw. It was a frequency, and that frequency is the exact reason you were chosen. There are specific signs that only the chosen ones carry, and I want to name them now so you can recognize yourself in them. The first is this: your dreams have been unusually vivid lately, more detailed than normal, carrying a weight that stays with you after you wake, as if something is trying to communicate something specific that your waking mind has not yet had language for. The second sign is a restlessness that has no clean explanation. You are not depressed, exactly. You are not lost, exactly. But there is a burning in your chest when you think about how much time has already passed. A righteous frustration that refuses to let you settle for the smaller version of your life. The third sign is that you have been clearing things without fully understanding why. Relationships, habits, spaces, stories you used to tell about yourself. Something inside you has been making room, and you did not initiate all of it consciously. Some of it simply fell away. The fourth sign is that this message found you today, not yesterday, not next month, today, in the specific week that it found you. And something in your spirit recognized it before your mind could analyze it. You are not here because you are spiritually perfect. You are not here because you have never doubted, never walked away, never gone quiet on God in a season where the silence felt mutual. You are here because even in the middle of all of that, something in you kept showing up. You opened another video. You stayed one more week. You prayed one more prayer even when the prayer felt like it was going nowhere. That is not weakness wearing the mask of faith. That is chosen one endurance, and heaven has been watching every single moment of it. I need you to understand something about why you are different that has nothing to do with ego. The world has a way of producing people who are shaped entirely by the opinions of the people around them. They want what their neighbors want. They measure themselves by the measurements their culture hands them. And there is nothing wrong with those people. But you have never been fully able to do that, even when you tried to fit the mold, even when you dressed yourself in someone else's expectations and performed the version of yourself that made other people comfortable. There was always a voice inside you that said, "This is not it. That voice was not your ambition. That voice was your assignment. And it has been speaking to you your entire life, waiting for a moment exactly like this one, when you were finally still enough to hear it clearly. Earth angels are not people who have it all together. They are people who carry light in the very places where they have been broken most. And if you have ever wondered why your pain has been so specific, why your particular combination of losses and gifts and longings seems almost architectural in its precision, it is because you were not built for a general purpose. You were built for an exact one. The specificity of your suffering is the specificity of your calling. Heaven does not waste good pain on people who will not use it. And everything that has been used against you is being rebuilt into the very thing that will help someone else find their way through. Before this month ends, God needs you to receive this one thing, not as a concept, not as a nice idea you encounter on a screen and then carry into your week unchanged, as a living truth that restructures how you see what is happening in your life right now. The waiting is not continuing. The positioning is complete. The frequency inside you, the one that has made you feel different and heavy and set apart, is not a malfunction. It is the signal, and the signal is ready to transmit. You have not been almost ready. You were ready the moment you showed up here. There is something I want to say to you before anything else, and I need you to let it land somewhere deeper than your thoughts. I know what the last season has felt like. Not in a general way, not in the way someone speaks from a safe distance about suffering they have only observed. I mean, I know the specific texture of what you have been carrying, because the people who find their way to this kind of message are not casual wanderers. They are people who have been through something that left a mark, something that changed the way they see time, the way they see themselves, the way they walk into a room full of people and still feel entirely alone. And so before I say anything else, I want to do something that almost no one has done for you in this season. I want to name what is actually happening inside you, not the version you present, not the "I am doing okay, I am trusting the process" version you offer to people who ask how you are doing. The real version, the one that lives underneath that answer. Because the chosen ones always carry two things at once: a deep knowing that they are meant for something significant, and a deep exhaustion from having held that knowing for so long without evidence. Let me name 4 things that you will recognize if you are truly in this season of waiting and positioning. The first is a wave of grief that arrives without warning, and it is not always about something you can point to directly. You will be driving, or standing in a grocery store, or watching someone else celebrate something, and a sadness will move through you that is not entirely about what is in front of you. It is grief with a longer memory than the present moment. It is the accumulated weight of years of almost, years of not yet, years of watching other people step into things that felt like they should have been yours. That grief is not weakness. It is not a sign that your faith is failing. It is the evidence that you have wanted something real, something specific, something that mattered enough to hurt when it did not arrive on your timeline. The second thing you will recognize is that certain places and certain people have begun to feel heavy in a way they did not before. Environments that used to feel comfortable now feel like they do not fit. Friendships that used to sustain you now feel like they are asking you to stay smaller than you are. And you have probably felt guilty about that. You have probably told yourself you are being ungrateful or difficult, or that you are pulling away from the very people who love you. But I want to offer you a different interpretation. When a thing has outgrown its container, the container does not become the enemy. The discomfort is simply the signal that the container was always temporary. The heaviness you feel in certain rooms is not a judgment on the room. It is information about where you are going. The third sign is a recurring dream, or a recurring image, or a recurring inner experience of a door that has not opened yet. Some of you see it literally in your sleep. Others of you feel it as a constant low hum of anticipation, a sense that you are standing just on the other side of something without being able to name what that something is. You have stood at that door so many times. You have prayed at it. You have knocked. You have waited. And there have been moments where you put your hand on the handle and felt something shift, only to pull back because the timing was not right, or the circumstances were not right, or someone told you it was not right. That door has not stopped existing, and your standing at it has not been futile. The door recognizes you. It has been waiting for you specifically. The fourth sign is this: the cease message keeps finding you in different places. You hear something in a song, and then you read almost the same thing in a random article, and then someone in your life says something that echoes it back, and it happens enough times that you cannot keep calling it coincidence. That is not coincidence. That is confirmation. When heaven wants to say something to a chosen one, it does not say it once. It layers it. It places it on multiple frequencies until the person it is meant for cannot avoid receiving it. If this message is one of several things that have been pointing you in the same direction lately, that is not random content consumption. That is a conversation you are already in the middle of. I want to acknowledge something now that I do not want to rush past, because if I do not say it plainly, you will not feel fully seen. I know about the mist that settles in at 2 or 3 in the morning. I know about the nights that are not dramatic, not crisis level, but just quietly hard. The nights where you lie there and the questions come. Not the big theological questions, the personal ones. The ones that start with why. Why has this taken so long? Why do other people seem to move forward with so much less effort? Why does it feel like I am always one season behind everyone else? Why am I still here? Why does my own life feel like a place I am not fully allowed to inhabit yet? Those questions are not faithlessness. They are the honest language of a person who has been holding on for a long time, and I will not tell you they are wrong to ask. I also know about the loneliness that does not go away in crowds, the kind that is not fixed by company. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel a particular kind of alone that comes from not yet being fully known, from carrying a future inside you that no one around you can quite see, from being ahead of a conversation that your current environment has not caught up to yet. That loneliness is not rejection. It is the loneliness of a pioneer. It is the loneliness of someone who is walking slightly ahead of where the path is clearly marked. Now I want to offer you a reframe, and I want to offer it carefully because I do not want to erase what you have just been honest about. I do not want to tell you the pain was not real or that the waiting has been easy. It has not been easy. But I want to show you the difference between two things that look identical from the outside but are entirely different in their meaning. There is a difference between being overlooked and being positioned. When someone is overlooked, they are invisible. They are not seen, not considered, not included in the conversation. Their absence goes unnoticed. But when someone is positioned, they are being placed deliberately. Their location has been chosen with intention. The delay is not because they were forgotten. The delay is because the exact right moment requires exact right preparation, and you cannot rush what is being built to last. Every chosen one goes through a season where being positioned feels indistinguishable from being overlooked. The external evidence is the same. The waiting room looks the same, whether you are waiting to be called in, or waiting for a call that was never placed. The difference is not visible from the outside. The difference is in what is happening on the inside during the waiting. You have not been forgotten. You have been positioned, and the positioning has been more precise than you know. The very things you thought were setbacks, the door that closed, the opportunity that passed, the season that stretched longer than you planned, were not accidents in your story. They were adjustments. Course corrections made by a hand that can see the whole map when you can only see the next 3 feet of road. And every adjustment brought you closer to this exact moment where everything that has been building inside you is finally aligned with what is about to open in front of you. You have been in a sacred holding, not a punishment, not an oversight, a holding, like a note held just before the song resolves, like a breath taken in before the word is spoken. The holding has felt long because it has been long. I am not going to pretend otherwise, but the length of it is proportional to the weight of what is coming. Small seasons produce small shifts. Long seasons, the kind that test everything, the kind that take things from you that you grieve, produce something that cannot be built any other way. So if you have been wondering whether you misheard something, whether you imagined the calling, whether what you felt in your spirit years ago was real or just wishful thinking, I am asking you to hold that question open for just a little longer, not to suppress it, not to perform certainty you do not have, but to stay in the question with curiosity rather than fear, because the answer is already on its way, and it will not be subtle when it arrives. If you have read this far and something inside you has been saying yes, quietly but insistently, I want to invite you to do one small thing. Type "I'm ready" in the comments right now. Not because it is a ritual, not because it will trigger some algorithm, but because there is something powerful about saying out loud, even in 2 words, even in a comment section, the thing that your spirit has been trying to say for months. I'm ready. Say it for yourself. Let it be real. And if this message has meant something to you today, share it with one person who you know is in their waiting season right now. Someone who needs to hear that they are not overlooked, they are positioned. That kind of message does not find people by accident. You can be the hand that delivers it to someone who needs it as much as you did when this began. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey where the revelation is not enough on its own, where knowing that you are positioned, knowing that you are not overlooked, knowing that the season has a purpose, still leaves you standing in the middle of your Tuesday with a question that is quieter but just as important as all the big spiritual ones. And that question is simply this: what do I do with my hands right now? What do I do today? Not in the grand scheme of destiny, not in the language of calling and assignment and eternal purpose, but today, in the hours I have in front of me, when the weight of waiting is still real and the breakthrough has not yet made itself visible, what is the practice? What is the thing I can reach for that is not just another idea to carry, but a tool I can actually use? I want to give you that today, not as a program, not as a system with 12 levels and a certification at the end, as something simple enough to do anywhere, something you can begin. Before this video is over, something that does not require a perfect environment or a particular emotional state or a season of your life that looks better than the one you are currently in, because chosen ones do not get to wait for perfect conditions before they practice. The practice is part of what makes the conditions change. I want to introduce you to something I call the 3-step return. It is not complicated. It does not require equipment. It does not require that you feel ready or spiritually warmed up or emotionally stable. It only requires that you are willing to be present for 7 minutes. And I will tell you more about why 7 minutes specifically matters in just a moment. Because the science behind that number is something that will change how you think about your own mind. But first, the practice itself. The first step is what I call the gratitude reversal. Most people practice gratitude by listing the things they are thankful that happened. And that is good. That is real. But the gratitude reversal asks a different question. It asks you to remember something you were once desperate for that did not happen, and to feel grateful for its absence. Think about a door that closed on you in a season when you were certain it was supposed to open. A relationship that ended when you wanted it to continue. An opportunity that passed. A plan that fell apart. I know that territory is tender. I know there are things in your history that still carry a sting when you visit them. But I am asking you to go there for just a moment, and instead of revisiting the loss, I want you to ask a different question. I want you to ask, what was on the other side of that door that I could not see from where I was standing? Because in almost every case, if you are honest, if you look at the full arc of what came after, you will find something, a relationship that would have kept you small, an opportunity that would have taken you somewhere that was never your destination, a plan that, if it had succeeded, would have locked you into a version of your life that was somebody else's vision for you, not your own. The gratitude reversal is not pretending the loss was not real. It is choosing to see the protection inside the redirection. And when you do that honestly, even for one small thing from your past, something shifts in your nervous system. The story you have been telling about your delays begins to soften at the edges. The evidence for abandonment gets smaller. The evidence for a guiding hand gets larger. Take a full minute with step 1. Sit with it. Let it be real. Do not rush to the next feeling. The second step is what I call the now declaration. And this is where the concept of time becomes important in a way that I want you to carry with you. Most of the pain of a waiting season comes not from the present moment itself, but from a conversation that happens in your mind about the present moment. You are not usually in agony about right now. You are in agony about how long right now has already lasted and how much longer it might continue. The now declaration interrupts that conversation by pulling you out of the story about time and back into the actual moment you are standing in. It is a simple statement, spoken aloud if possible, whispered if necessary, but never just thought. It has to move through your lips. And the statement is this: I am not behind. I am exactly where the preparation requires me to be. And what is meant for me is moving toward me right now. Say it like you mean it, even if you do not fully mean it yet. Say it like you are practicing a truth that your circumstances have not caught up to yet, because that is exactly what you are doing. The spoken word has a function in the nervous system that silent thought does not. When you speak something, your brain registers it differently than when you only think it. The body responds. The breath changes. Something in the chest either tightens against it or opens toward it, and either response is information. If something in you resists the statement, that resistance is exactly where the work is. Stay with it. Say it again. Not to force yourself into false positivity, but to locate where the doubt lives so that light can get into that specific place. Step 2 takes approximately 2 minutes. 1 minute to say the declaration several times, and 1 minute to simply notice what happens in your body when you say it. The third step is the one I want to spend the most time explaining, because it is the one that most people skip. And skipping it is the reason they feel the same way after their practice as they did before it. Step 3 is 7 minutes of intentional silence. Not meditation in the traditional sense. Not emptying your mind, which is both impossible and not what I am asking. Not prayer in the sense of speaking, simply receiving. You close your eyes, you put your phone face down, you let the room be what it is. And for 7 minutes, you do nothing except stay. You stay in the stillness. You let whatever needs to surface. You do not chase the thoughts that come. You do not perform calm. You simply remain present in the silence without trying to fill it. I said I would tell you why 7 minutes matters, and I want to honor that promise now because this is not an arbitrary number. The research on this is real, and it is remarkable, and it connects the spiritual practice you are doing to something that is happening in the physical architecture of your brain at the same time. There is a state of brain activity that neuroscientists have studied extensively, a particular frequency of electrical activity in the brain that is associated with creativity, with learning, with deep intuition, with the kind of insight that arrives not from analysis, but from a quality of receptivity that ordinary waking consciousness rarely reaches. That frequency is called the theta state. And the theta state is not exotic or rare or reserved for monks and mystics. Every one of us passes through it twice a day, in the moments just before we fall asleep and just after we begin to wake. The problem is that we pass through it too quickly to use it. We either fall into sleep or we snap into the urgency of the waking day, and the theta window closes before we ever had a chance to inhabit it intentionally. 7 minutes of intentional silence, practiced consistently, is enough to begin training your brain to access the theta state voluntarily, not to fall asleep, not to check out, but to drop below the surface noise of your thinking mind into a layer of awareness where different kinds of knowing become available. The kind of knowing that tells you which door to walk through. The kind of knowing that shows you the solution your analytical mind could not reach. The kind of knowing that chosen ones have always described as hearing something, feeling something, receiving something in the foreign. Quiet. This is not mysticism dressed up as science, and it is not science dressed up as mysticism. It is both at once, because the frequency of a receptive, open, still mind is the same frequency at which the deepest forms of creative intelligence and spiritual perception operate. When you practice the 7 minutes, you are not just being still. You are tuning the instrument. You are preparing the receiver. You are doing what every musician does before a performance, what every athlete does before a competition, what every person who has ever done something excellent does before the moment of excellence arrives. You are entering the state that makes the thing possible. And here is what I want you to know about why this matters specifically for you in this specific season. The chosen ones who are in a waiting season are often also in a season of mental noise. The uncertainty produces anxiety. The anxiety produces overthinking. The overthinking produces more noise. And the noise makes it impossible to hear the very signal that would tell you what your next step is. The 7 minutes is not passive. It is the most active thing I am asking you to do today, because you are actively choosing to stop adding to the noise and to listen instead. You are actively creating the conditions in which the thing you have been asking to receive can actually reach you. So here is the 3-step return in its simplest form. You begin with the gratitude reversal, 1 minute of genuine reflection on something that did not happen that you are now able to feel protected by rather than punished by. You move into the now declaration, 2 minutes of speaking your positioning out loud and noticing what your body does in response. And you close with 7 minutes of intentional silence, not performed calm, not forced peace, just presence, just staying, just receiving. You can do this in your car before you walk into work. You can do it in a bathroom with the door closed if that is the only private space you have. You can do it at a table in a coffee shop with your eyes closed and your hands flat on the table. You can do it before your feet hit the floor in the morning. The environment does not have to be sacred for the practice to produce something sacred. The intention is what consecrates the space. I want to say something about the 7 minutes specifically before I move forward, because there is a deeper dimension to this practice that I will come back to in more detail later in this message. What the silence does is not only neurological. It is not only about theta waves and brain states and the architecture of receptivity, though all of that is real and all of it matters. What the silence does at its deepest level is create a space in which you stop performing your faith and simply inhabit it. Most of us spend so much energy managing the appearance of our belief, making sure we say the right things, think the right thoughts, feel the right feelings, that we never actually rest inside the believing itself. The 7 minutes is not about achieving a feeling. It is about stopping the management long enough to discover what is already there underneath all of it. And what is already there in every chosen one who has found their way to a message like this one is not emptiness. It is a frequency. It is a signal. It is something that has been trying to find a quiet enough moment to make itself known. Give it 7 minutes. Give it the silence. And then pay attention to what happens in the hours that follow, not during the practice itself, but afterward, in the middle of the ordinary moments of your day, when something shifts in a way you were not expecting and cannot entirely explain. That shift is not random. That shift is the practice working. The practice, when it is working, is simply the beginning of what I want to tell you about next. Something happened in your 7 minutes that I want to name before we go any further. Not as a formula, not as a guaranteed outcome that every person experiences in an identical way, but as something that the Joan ones who have sat in that silence long enough consistently report. There is a moment, sometimes at minute 3, sometimes at minute 6, sometimes right at the edge where the silence is about to end, where something settles. Not dramatically, not with a flash of light or a rushing wind, just a settling, like a snow globe that has been shaken for years finally being set down on a steady surface and allowed to clear. And in that clearing, even briefly, something becomes available that was not available before. A thought that feels less like your own thinking and more like something handed to you. A sense of direction where there was only fog, a warmth in the chest that does not have an obvious source. I want to tell you what that is, and I want to tell you why it is not coincidence, and I want to bring together the spiritual and the scientific in a way that will make complete sense of everything you have been experiencing. Here is a statement that I want you to hold carefully, not as a metaphor, but as a literal description of what the research shows. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Scientists who study the brain have been measuring that frequency for decades, and they call it gamma. The gamma state is the brain operating at its highest level of integration. The state in which different regions of that normally work reparably begin to communicate with each other in a unified way. It is the state that has been measured in experienced meditators, in people who describe moments of profound creative insight, in individuals who report what they call spiritual experience, and in children whose minds have not yet been trained out of a kind of open, receptive, wonder-filled engagement with the world. The gamma state is not something exotic that only certain people can reach. It is something every human brain is capable of. But for most adults in the modern world, it has become increasingly rare because the conditions of modern life, the noise, the urgency, the constant stimulation, the never-ending demand for reaction and response, actively suppress the brain states that make gamma possible. What this means for you is not abstract. It means that the frequency you have been carrying, the one that makes you feel different, the one that makes you dream at a different depth and grieve at a different depth and long for things at a different depth, that frequency has a neurological signature. It is real, it is measurable, and it is the frequency at which the most significant forms of human perception and creativity and spiritual sensitivity operate. You were not born oversensitive. You were born tuned to a frequency that most people spend their entire lives never consciously accessing. And the season you have been in, as hard as it has been, has not suppressed that frequency. It has refined it. I want to introduce you to someone whose work I believe you need to know about, because it connects everything. I have just said to something practical, something you can use, something that builds directly on the 7 minutes of intentional silence you have already started practicing. His name is Dr. James Rivers, and he is a neuroscientist who spent more than 30 years researching the relationship between brainwave states and human performance. His work was connected to research programs at MIT and NASA, environments where the question of how to optimize human cognitive function was not theoretical, but urgent, because the people in those programs needed to perform at the absolute edge of human capability under extreme conditions. What Dr. Rivers and his colleagues discovered over the course of thousands of days of research was something that fundamentally reframed how we understand the relationship between the brain and human potential. They found that the brain wave states most associated with peak performance, deep creativity, rapid learning, and what people describe as intuitive knowing are not random occurrences that happen by luck or genetic privilege. They are reproducible. They can be deliberately induced, and the mechanism for inducing them is not complex. It does not require years of meditation practice or pharmaceutical intervention or expensive technology. It requires sound. Specifically, it requires audio frequencies that are designed to guide the brain into particular states through a process called brainwave entrainment. The principle behind this is straightforward. The brain has a natural tendency to synchronize its electrical activity with rhythmic external stimuli. When you expose the brain to audio frequencies calibrated to a specific target state, the brain begins to match that frequency. It is the same principle that makes music change your mood, but applied with scientific precision to specific neurological targets. What Dr. Rivers developed out of this research is something called the genius wave. It is a 7-minute audio track designed using a combination of binaural beats and precisely calibrated sound frequencies that guides the brain into the theta state first, and from there creates the neurological conditions for gamma activation. The theta state, which sits between 4 and 8 cycles per second in terms of brainwave frequency, is the state of deep receptivity, creativity, and intuitive access. Children spend enormous amounts of time in theta naturally. It is one of the reasons children learn so much faster than adults, why they imagine so freely, why they have not yet built the internal walls that keep most adults from accessing their own deepest knowing. The gamma state, which operates at much higher frequencies, is what happens when that receptive theta foundation allows for a sudden integration of information across the whole brain. The eureka moment, the breakthrough, the flash of knowing that arrives whole and complete rather than assembled piece by piece. 7 minutes is not arbitrary. The research found that 7 minutes is the optimal window for this kind of entrainment. Long enough for the brain to fully settle into the target frequency, short enough that it does not produce the fatigue that longer sessions can create. This is why the 7 minutes of intentional silence I asked you to practice earlier matters more than it might have seemed. You were already beginning to create the internal conditions that the genius wave is designed to deepen and stabilize. The silence was the preparation. The audio is the activation. I want to tell you about someone I will call Maya, because her story is one that I keep coming back to when I think about what this kind of tool can mean for a chosen one in a waiting season. Maya had been in her waiting season for what felt like too long. She was not someone who had given up, but she was someone who had become very quiet about her hopes, because she had announced them too many times to too many people, and then had to explain why they had not yet arrived. She started using the genius wave, not with dramatic expectations, but with something closer to tired openness. She listened every morning for 7 minutes before she allowed herself to look at her phone. And what she reported was not a sudden external miracle. What she reported was a shift in internal clarity. She described it as fog lifting just enough to see one step. And from that one step, something began to move. Within weeks, a conversation she had been putting off for months happened naturally. A door that had been stuck began to move. And the quality of her thinking, her ability to stay present in difficulty rather than spiraling, changed in a way that the people around her noticed before she fully registered it herself. Another person I want to mention came to the genius wave in a season of profound mental clutter. He was not in crisis. He was functional, responsible, showing up. But he described his mind as a room where every drawer was open and everything was spilling onto the floor simultaneously. He could not think clearly enough to make a decision he had been needing to make for over a year. After 3 weeks of the 7-minute practice, he told me that for the first time in longer than he could remember, he sat down to think about the decision, and the answer was simply there. Not because something outside had changed, because the noise had quieted enough for him to hear something that had been available all along. I know that some of you are sitting with a very reasonable thought right now. You are thinking that $39 is not nothing. And I want to say directly to you, you are right. It is not nothing. In a season where every dollar matters, where you have been careful with what you have, because the waiting season has also often been a lean season. I do not take lightly the ask. And I am not going to tell you that this is a small decision or that the money does not matter. What I am going to tell you is this. The Genius Wave is normally priced at $49, and it is available today for $39 through the link in the pinned comment below this video. There is a 90-day money-back guarantee, full and complete. No fine print that makes it complicated. Hoops to jump through. If you use it for 90 days and you do not feel that something has shifted, you ask for your money back and you receive it. That is not a marketing promise layered over a difficult process. That is a straightforward commitment from people who believe in what this does. Please hear me on this as well. There are imitation products in this space that use similar language and similar claims. The only version I am directing you to is through the link in the pinned comment below this video. That is the only source I can speak to with confidence. Do not search for it elsewhere. Do not purchase from a third-party site, because what you will find will not be the same thing and will not carry the same guarantee. And I want to be honest with you about something else. This offer is not permanent at this price. The $39 access point is available for a limited time and to a limited number of people through this specific link. I am not saying that to manufacture pressure. I am saying it because I have watched people sit on decisions like this in a waiting season, telling themselves they will come back to it. And then the window closes and the moment passes, and the version of their life that could have been catalyzed by that one small decision stays hypothetical a little longer. You have waited long enough for things that were worth waiting for. This is not one of them. This is a decision you can make today, and I want you to make it for yourself. What Dr. Rivers built and what thousands of people have now used to quiet the noise and access the frequency they were always carrying is not a replacement for the faith you have been practicing or the endurance you have already demonstrated. It is a tool, a very specific, very researched, very practical tool that works with the brain you already have to unlock the states of mind that have been inside you all along, waiting for the right conditions to emerge fully. The silence you practiced was the first invitation. The genius wave is the door that silence opens into. I want to stay with you here for a moment before we move forward, because what I am about to say is not easy to say, and it is not easy to hear, and I think the temptation for both of us is to skip past it too quickly in the direction of hope. Hope is coming, I promise you that. But if we arrive at hope without first sitting honestly in the weight of what the waiting has actually taken from you, then the hope will feel thin, like something layered over a wound that was never properly cleaned. And you deserve more than thin hope. You deserve the kind of hope that has looked directly at the cost and decided to believe anyway. So let me do something that almost no one does in these conversations. Let me sit with you in the hard part first. The waiting has taken things from you. Real things, tangible things. Things that cannot be fully recovered by a reframe or a revelation or even a genuine breakthrough, because some things are time sensitive. And the time has passed, and no amount of future blessing erases the specific shape of what was lost in the specific years when it was lost. I want to name those things, not to reopen wounds for the sake of pain, but because you have been carrying these losses quietly, folding them into your endurance, presenting the brave face while internally grieving something that no one around you has fully acknowledged. And grief that is not witnessed does not disappear. It goes underground. And underground grief has a way of showing up as numbness, as cynicism dressed as wisdom, as a protective smallness that keeps you from reaching for the things you are about to be invited into. So, let me witness it now. The waiting has taken relationships that could have been. There are people who might have been in your life differently if you had stepped into your purpose earlier, if the season had not demanded so much of your interior world that you had very little left to offer outward. There are connections that dried up not because of failure or fault, but because of timing. Because you were in a process that made you temporarily unavailable in ways that other people could not always understand or wait through. There are friendships that faded, not with drama, but with quiet distance. Because the person you were becoming in your waiting season was not yet recognizable, not even to yourself, and the gap between who you were becoming and who people expected you to remain was too wide to bridge comfortably. Those lost connections were not punishment, but they were loss, real loss. And I am not going to tell you they did not matter. The waiting has taken career ground that feels irretrievable. You have watched people move forward in their professional lives while you were in a season that seemed to be asking everything of you internally while offering very little visible progress externally. You have done the math in your quiet moments, the painful arithmetic of where you thought you would be by this age, by this year, by this point in the story, and where you actually are. And there is a gap there that has a specific emotional weight, a weight that sounds like I should be further along and feels like a mixture of shame and grief and a frustration you do not always have clean language for. That gap is real. The years were real. The slow seasons were real, and I am not going to minimize them by telling you only that they were preparation. They were preparation, but they were also loss, and both things are true at the same time. The waiting has taken your freedom to speak your dreams at full volume. There was a time, perhaps earlier in your life, perhaps in a particular season of faith or hope, when you told people what you believed was coming. You spoke about it with confidence. You shared the vision with people you trusted. And then the waiting stretched. And then it stretched further. And the people you had told began to ask questions with their eyes, even when they were too kind to ask them, with their words. And so you got quieter. You learned to hold the dream more privately, to protect it from the exposure that invited skepticism, to stop volunteering the territory of your hope to people who had not yet learned how to handle it carefully. And that quieting was a survival strategy, and it was a reasonable one, but it also cost you something. It cost you the freedom of speaking your full self out loud. It cost you the lightness that comes from being fully known. And you have been carrying the unexpressed weight of an unlived declaration for longer than you should have had to. And the waiting has taken your trust in your own perception. This one is perhaps the most significant loss of all. In the early days, you felt certain. You had a sense of something, a knowing, a direction, a call that felt as real as anything you had ever experienced. But the longer the waiting lasted, the more you began to question the quality of your own inner knowing. You began to wonder whether you had misread something, whether what felt like a calling was really just wishful thinking, whether the voice you thought you heard was your own ambition echoing in a chamber it had decorated to look like something more significant. That erosion of self-trust is not a small thing. It is one of the most painful aspects of an extended waiting season, and it is also one of the most strategic attacks on a chosen one, because a person who does not trust their own perception cannot step confidently into the very assignment that requires them to perceive clearly. I want to sit with all of that for a moment without rushing to fix it, because it is real, and it deserves to be held honestly before it is reframed. Now, I want to introduce you to someone from an ancient story, someone whose biography carries a particular kind of weight for this conversation. His name is Joseph. And I am not going to tell you the triumphant ending of his story yet, because the triumphant ending is not what I want you to sit with right now. I want you to sit with the middle of his story, because the middle of his story is where most of you are living. Joseph was a young man who carried a dream. Not metaphorically, literally. He dreamed something so specific, so directional, so clearly about the shape of his future that he made the mistake of speaking it too soon to the wrong people. And the response was not celebration. It was rejection. It was betrayal from the people who should have been his greatest supporters. The people who shared his blood and his table and his history looked at the fullness of what he was becoming and decided they could not tolerate it. And what followed was not a quick correction. It was years. It was the pit, and then the long walk to a foreign country, and then the service in a household that was not his, and then the false accusation, and then the prison. Every time the story seemed to be moving toward resolution, another door closed, another layer of the waiting deepened. I want you to stay in that part of his story with me for a moment. Not the pit as a plot point on the way to the palace, just the pit itself. The experience of having spoken a dream that felt divinely given, and then finding yourself at the bottom of a hole that the very people who should have believed in you threw you into. The experience of arriving in a foreign land with nothing familiar, nothing that confirmed the dream, nothing that made external sense of the internal knowing you were still somehow holding. The experience of doing everything right in Potiphar's house, of being faithful and excellent and trustworthy, and then being accused and imprisoned for exactly the quality of character that should have been your vindication. The experience of interpreting someone else's dream accurately, of offering your gift in the middle of your own confinement, and then watching the person you helped walk out of the prison and forget you entirely for 2 more years. That is not a story that resolves quickly. That is a story that required Joseph to hold a dream in a dark place for longer than any human being should reasonably be asked to hold anything. And the text does not tell us that he held it perfectly. The text does not tell us he never wept, never doubted, never lay awake in the prison, wondering whether the dream was real, or whether he had simply been the kind of young man who mistook his own longing for divine communication. The text is honest about the journey without being graphic about the suffering. And that honesty is itself a form of witness to what it costs to carry something true in a season that offers nothing to confirm it. I am telling you about Joseph not because his story is a template that guarantees the same outcome for yours. I am telling you about him because he is proof that the dream surviving the waiting is not contingent on the waiting being short. It is not contingent on the circumstances cooperating. It is not contingent on everyone around you believing what you believe about yourself. The dream that was placed in Joseph was not dependent on his brother's approval to be real. It was not dependent on Potiphar's house to be the right location for its unfolding. It was not dependent on the cupbearer's memory to be activated in its proper time. The dream had its own appointed moment, and that appointed moment was not deterred by any of the obstacles that seemed, at every stage, like they should have been sufficient to end the story. Your dream has its own appointed moment too, and none of what has happened in the years between the first knowing and this present moment has been sufficient to end your story. If it had been sufficient, the story would have ended. You would not be here, but you are here, still holding it, still showing up, still opening another video in another week of another season that has not yet fully resolved. That is not passive endurance. That is chosen one, faithfulness. And it has not gone unnoticed by the one who placed the dream inside you in the first place. The years have taken real things from you. I am not minimizing that. But they have not taken the dream, and they have not taken you. And those two facts together are about to become the most important foundation you have ever stood on. Before I begin this part, I want to be transparent with you about the process I am following, because I made a commitment to do this openly before writing what comes next. Every section of this message is built with intention, and this particular section requires me to pause and think carefully before I speak, because what I am about to introduce you to is not decoration. It is architecture. It is a framework for understanding time itself in a way that will permanently alter how you interpret what has been happening in your life. And I do not want to choose the wrong lens for where you are right now. The emotional core of everything we have been building together in this message is this. You are a person who has carried something real for a long time, in conditions that did not always support the carrying, and you are standing right now at the threshold of a shift that you can feel but cannot yet fully see. The two concepts I want to bring to you in this section are chosen, specifically because they speak to that threshold. The first is the ancient Greek distinction between two entirely different experiences of time. The second is a Hebrew word that almost never gets translated correctly in modern language, and whose true meaning will reframe every year of waiting you have ever experienced. Let me begin with time itself, because I think you have been in a painful relationship with time for a while now, and I want to offer you a way of understanding it that gives you back your peace. In the ancient Greek world, there were two separate words for time, and they described two completely different realities. The first word was chronos. Chronos is the time you already know. It is the time on your phone, the time on your calendar, the time that moves in one direction at a fixed and measurable pace, regardless of what is happening inside you or around you. Chronos is the time that has been passing while you have been waiting. It is the time you count when you say things like, "It has been 3 years," or "I thought by now," or "How much longer?" Chronos is the clock on the wall that keeps moving, whether or not the thing you are waiting for has arrived. And there is nothing wrong with Chronos time. It is real. It is how we organize our lives. But Chronos time, when it becomes the only framework through which you interpret your waiting, is a source of profound suffering, because Chronos time has no awareness of purpose. It does not know that some seasons are longer than others for reasons that serve the person in them. It simply counts. It simply moves. And when you measure your life exclusively through Chronos, you will always feel behind, because the clock does not know what you are being prepared for. The second word was kairos, and kairos describes something entirely different. Kairos is not the quantity of time. It is the quality of a moment. It is the right time, the appointed time, the time that is full of meaning in a way that transcends the clock. In the ancient world, kairos described the exact moment when the archer releases the arrow, when the opening in the battle presents itself, when the window is available that was not available before, and will not be available again in exactly the same way. Kairos is not something you calculate. It is something you recognize. And here is what I need you to understand about where you are standing right now. You have been measuring your waiting in Chronos. You have been counting the days, adding up the months, tallying the years. But what has actually been happening around you, underneath you, in the unseen architecture of your story, has been operating in Kairos. The preparation has been moving toward a specific moment, a fullness of time, a Kairos moment that is not determined by the calendar, but by the readiness of every element that must be in place for what is coming to arrive correctly. This is why the waiting has felt so disconnected from any kind of progress, because Kairos preparation does not always look like forward movement in Chronos time. Sometimes the most significant preparation is invisible. Sometimes the most important things that are being arranged for your Kairos moment are happening entirely outside your field of vision, in places and people and circumstances you have not yet encountered. You cannot see it on a clock. You cannot measure it on a calendar. But it is happening. And the fact that it is happening in Kairos does not make it less real than the time you can count. It makes it more purposeful. Kairos is not a delay in Chronos. Kairos is a different kind of time entirely. And you, chosen one, have been living in a Kairos season. Now, let me bring you to the second concept, the Hebrew word that I believe will change the way you understand every day of waiting you have ever experienced. The word is kava. In most English translations of ancient scripture, this word gets rendered simply as wait. And that translation, while not wrong, is catastrophically incomplete. Because kava does not simply mean to sit still and endure until something changes. The root meaning of kava is to twist together, to braid, to intertwine strands in a way that produces something stronger than any single strand could be on its own. In the ancient world, this was the image of rope making. When you kava, you are not passively sitting. You are being wound together with something. You are being braided into a strength. that is only possible through the process of being twisted, stretched, and integrated with other strands under tension. Think about what that means for every year you have been waiting. Every year of tension, every year of stretching, every year of feeling like you were being pulled in multiple directions simultaneously has not been a year of stagnation. It has been a year of kava. You have been in the rope-making process. The tension was not punishment. The stretching was not cruelty. It was the necessary condition for producing something that will hold weight that single-strand endurance never could. The people who step into significant assignments without the kava process are the ones who break under the first real pressure, because their strength was never woven together under tension. It was stilled too quickly in conditions that were too comfortable. Your strength is different. Your strength has been twisted and braided and tested over years of conditions that were not comfortable, not convenient, and not kind to your timeline. And that strength is now ready to hold something it could not have held before the process. You are not delayed. You are not behind. You are not someone whose story has been paused by an administrative error in heaven. You are someone who has been in kava, and the rope that has been made in your waiting years is about to bear the weight of the exact thing it was made to carry. I want to bring these two concepts together now and place you specifically in the picture, because abstract ideas are only useful if they land in the real geography of your actual life. You have been in a kairos season, which means that what has been happening around you cannot be accurately measured by chronos time. The 3 years, or the 5 years, or the 10 years that you have been counting on the clock of your ordinary life do not represent 3 or 5 or 10 years of delay. They represent the exact amount of kava time required to produce. The specific strength, the specific depth, the specific quality of perception and resilience and compassion that your particular assignment requires. No more and no less. The waiting was not excessive. It was precise. Kairos is always precise, even when Chronos makes it look inefficient. And here is the third concept I want to give you, because it sits alongside Kairos and Kava and completes the picture. It is what the ancient language called the wilderness season. In the stories of the Paman, greatest figures of faith, the wilderness is not a sidebar. It is not an unfortunate detour. It is a required passage. The wilderness is the place of stripping, the place where everything that is not essential falls away, the place where the person discovers what they are actually made of, when the external supports and the social confirmations and the comfortable, familiar contexts are removed. The wilderness is uncomfortable by design, not because the design is cruel, but because the wilderness is the only environment in which certain kinds of growth are possible. You cannot develop the kind of trust that holds in genuine darkness while you are living in comfortable light. You cannot develop the kind of compassion that reaches other people in their wilderness while you have never been in your own. You cannot develop the kind of discernment that knows the difference between what is from God and what is merely good-sounding, while you are surrounded by easy answers and uncomplicated seasons. The wilderness produces things in you that the promised land will require you to have, and no amount of shortcutting the wilderness produces the same result. Every chosen one who has ever stepped into a significant assignment has a wilderness in their biography, not as a footnote, as a chapter, often as the longest chapter. But here is what I want you to hear clearly about the wilderness you have been in. The wilderness is not your destination. It is a passage. It has a threshold. And the threshold of a wilderness season looks like exactly this: a growing clarity that the season is shifting, a sense that the landscape is beginning to change, a collection of signals arriving from multiple directions that point to the same thing. A message finding you at a specific moment that feels less like coincidence and more like confirmation. The wilderness does not end with a dramatic announcement. It ends with a step. One step across a threshold that you have been standing at longer than you realized. And the step is not taken because all the conditions are finally perfect. It is taken because the kava process is complete, because the kairos moment has arrived, because the wilderness has finished its work in you and the passage is open. You are not delayed. You are not forgotten. You are not someone whose dream has expired or whose calling has been reassigned. You are someone who has been in the most precise and purposeful season of preparation that your specific assignment required. And the wilderness season, the long one, the one that has taken things from you and stretched you and left you in the dark on more nights than you care to count. That season has finished its primary work. What it needed to build in you has been built. What it needed to strip from you has been stripped. What it needed to teach you has been learned. Even the lessons you do not yet have language for, even the wisdom you are still in the process of integrating. You are not behind. You are being assembled, and the assembly is very nearly complete. Type "I receive" in the comments right now if something in this section landed in a place that needed to hear it. And if someone in your life is in their own wilderness season right now, someone who needs to understand that their waiting has a name and a purpose and a threshold that is closer than they think, share this message with them today. Not because you have it all figured out, but because you have been in the kind of season that gives you the authority to speak to someone else who is still in the middle of theirs. That authority is part of what the wilderness was building in you all along. There is a particular kind of courage required to believe that something is moving when you cannot yet see it moving. Not the courage of action, which is its own thing, but the quieter and in some ways harder courage of internal conviction in the absence of external confirmation. You have been practicing that courage for longer than most people would have sustained it, and I want to honor that before I tell you what I am about to tell you, because what comes next is not speculation. It is not motivational language designed to make you feel temporarily better before the ordinary weight of your life settles back in. What I am about to describe is real movement, specific movement, in 3 areas of your life that are about to look different than they have looked in a long time. And I want you to receive it not as a promise from a stranger on a screen, but as a confirmation of something your own spirit has already been sensing. Something that has been pressing against the inside of your chest with increasing urgency in recent weeks. Something that kept waking you up slightly earlier than usual. Something that made you return to this kind of message today, instead of doing the other thing you told yourself you were going to do. The first area where things are already moving is your inner world. And I am starting here deliberately, because this is the one that the culture around you consistently undervalues, and it is the one that everything else depends on. In the coming days and weeks, you are going to notice a shift in your internal climate. Not a complete transformation, not a sudden arrival of permanent peace, but a specific kind of clarification. The static that has been running in the background of your mind, the low hum of anxiety and question and unresolved uncertainty, is going to begin to settle. Not because your circumstances will have magically resolved, but because something in your internal orientation has shifted during this season's final chapter. And that shift is starting to produce a different quality of inner experience. You will notice it in small ways first. A moment of unexpected stillness in the middle of a day that has no right to be still. a decision that comes to you cleanly and without the usual accompanying fog of self-doubt. A morning where you wake up and the first thought is not the weight of what has not happened yet, but a quiet and unforced readiness for what the day holds. These are not small things. These are the first signs of a frequency shift, and a frequency shift always begins in the interior before it manifests in the exterior. What I want to caution you against in this internal shift is the temptation to test it to death. There is a pattern among chosen ones who have been in long waiting seasons where the first signs of change produce not rest but a new kind of anxiety, an anxious monitoring of the change itself, a constant checking to see if the shift is still there, a hypervigilance that is well-intentioned but that actually interferes with the very process it is trying to confirm. When you notice the internal clarification beginning, do not poke at it. Do not interrogate it. Do not demand that it prove its permanence before you allow yourself to settle into it. Simply receive it. Let it be what it is without immediately trying to define what it means or predict where it leads. The gift of returning inner peace is not made more real by analysis. It is made more real by inhabiting it gently and without conditions. What you can trust in this season is the quality of the quiet. If it carries peace, it is from the right source. If it carries urgency that feels like fear, that is different information. Learn to distinguish between the two, because they often arrive wearing similar clothing. The peace that precedes a kairos moment is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is simply a settling. A sense of things coming into alignment that does not require you to force anything, or perform anything, or convince anyone of anything, including yourself. The second area where movement is already happening is in your relational landscape. And this one I want to describe carefully because it can feel disorienting before it feels like gift. In the weeks and months ahead, you are going to notice a natural reorganization of the people in your immediate circle. Some of this has already begun. People who were present in your life for reasons that were connected to a season you are now leaving will begin to drift, not necessarily with conflict, not necessarily with a painful ending, but with a natural and mutual loosening of connection that serves both people's next chapter. This is not loss, even when it feels like loss. It is alignment. You cannot carry the full relational weight of a previous season into a new one without it slowing your movement. And the people who are meant to walk with you into what is next are not all in your life yet. Some of them are being positioned as precisely as you have been positioned. Some of them are finishing their own wilderness passage. Some of them are going to walk through a door in the next season that brings them directly into your path. And the encounter will not feel like networking or strategy. It will feel like recognition, like you have known each other longer than the calendar would suggest. What you should not do in this period of relational reorganization is force the retention of connections that are naturally completing. I know the loneliness of the waiting season has made you protective of every connection you have. And I know that the idea of further loss feels like too much to absorb on top of everything else. But some of what you have been holding on to is not yours to hold. Some of it has already served its purpose in your story with grace and beauty and genuine love. And releasing it is not failure. It is faithfulness to the next chapter. Hold your people with open hands in this season. Let what wants to stay, stay. Let what wants to shift, shift. And create internal space for the connections that are coming, because they are coming and they will require room. What you can trust in this season of relational movement is this. The people who are truly assigned to your next chapter will recognize something in you that does not require explanation. You will not have to convince them to believe in what you are carrying. You will not have to perform your purpose for them, or justify your history, or apologize for the years that did not look impressive from the outside. They will simply see it, and, being seen in that way, after a season of feeling so consistently unseen, is going to feel like coming home in a way you did not know you were homesick for. The third area where movement is already happening is the one that most of you came here hoping to hear about, and I want to give it to you honestly, without inflating it into something it is not. The area is provision and opportunity. The material dimension of your life, the resources, the doors, the possibilities, is about to shift in a way that will not look like what you imagined it would look like when you were picturing the breakthrough. It rarely does. The breakthrough, when it comes for a chosen one who has been through the kava process, rarely arrives with fanfare. It arrives quietly at first, almost suspiciously ordinary in its presentation. A conversation that opens a door you did not know was there. An idea that comes to you in the stillness that seems almost too simple to be significant, and then turns out to be exactly the thing. A resource that appears from a direction you were not watching, offered by someone you were not expecting, in a form that you would not have recognized as provision 2 years ago, but that now fits exactly what you need. What you should not do in this period of opening provision is evaluate the size of the initial appearance and use it to predict the scope of what is coming. The chosen miss their breakthroughs most often, miss them not because the breakthrough was absent, but because it arrived in a smaller package than they expected, and they were watching the horizon for something large while something significant was standing quietly at their front door. Stay humble in your watching. Stay alert to the ordinary. Stay willing to take a step that looks small, because small steps taken from the right internal place have a way of opening into something that the step itself gave no indication of. What you can trust in this season of material shift is that what is coming is specifically just for you. Not a generic blessing distributed evenly across a category of people who needed something. A specific provision for a specific person with a specific assignment, delivered at a specific moment that is not accidental. The Kairos moment we have been talking about does not produce generic results. It produces the exact right thing for the exact right person at the exact right time. And you are the exact right person. I want to close this section with something I want you to carry, not as a motivational phrase, but as an active orienting truth for the days ahead. In every one of the 3 areas I have just described, the inner world, the relational landscape, and the dimension of provision and opportunity, the movement is already happening. It is not about to start. It has started. The evidence may not yet be visible enough for the people around you to see it. But you feel it. You have been feeling it. That is why you are here. That is why this message found you today rather than 6 months ago or 6 months from now. The timing of your arrival here is itself evidence of the movement. You do not find this kind of message in the middle of a completely static season. You find it at the edge of a shift. You find it when something unseen architecture of your story is already rearranging itself. And your spirit is awake enough to know that the moment requires a different kind of attention. Type "I'm ready" in the comments if something in what you just heard landed as confirmation of something you have already been sensing. Share this with one person in your life who is standing at the edge of their own shift and does not yet have language for what they are feeling. Not because they need to be convinced of anything, but because sometimes the most powerful thing one chosen one can do for another is simply name what is already true. The movement you just heard described in those 3 areas of your life is not coming to a stranger. It is coming to someone who has a name in this season. And I want to give you that name now, not as a label you wear for identity's sake, but as a description of what you have actually become through the process you have been in. Because one of the most disorienting things about a long waiting season is that you can go through the entire transformation and still be introducing yourself to yourself using old language, still calling yourself by the name of your last season, still describing yourself in terms of what you have not yet done, rather than what you have already become. And the becoming, chosen one, has been real. Whether or not you have had witnesses for it, whether or not the external evidence has caught up to the internal reality. The person who entered this waiting season and the person who is standing at its threshold right now are not the same person. And the one who is standing here now needs a name that fits. The name I want to give you is this: you are a cycle breaker. Not in the trendy social media sense of the phrase, stripped of its weight and reduced to a caption. In the original and costly sense, a cycle breaker is someone who, through the specific suffering of their own story, has been given the capacity to interrupt a pattern that was never supposed to continue. Every family has patterns that run through generations like rivers cutting channels in stone. Patterns of scarcity, of broken trust, of silenced voices, of unlived potential, of doors that were always almost opened and then closed at the last moment. These patterns are not random. They are the accumulated weight of generation after generation of people who were in their own waiting seasons and did not have what you are being given right now, did not have the language, did not have the tools, did not have someone to sit with them in the wilderness and name what the wilderness was building. And so the pattern continued, not because of failure or weakness, but because of the absence of exactly what is being placed in your hands right now. You are the one in your line who breaks the channel. You are the one in whose generation the river changes course. And that is not a small thing. That is not a personal victory wrapped in spiritual language. That is a generational assignment. The children who come after you, the people in your sphere whose lives will be touched by the fullness of what you step into, will live differently because you held on through the years that gave you every reasonable excuse to let ever go. That is what a cycle breaker does. Not with a dramatic announcement or a public declaration, but with the quiet, sustained, almost invisible faithfulness of someone who decided, again and again in private moments that no one else saw, to keep believing in something that the circumstances had no obligation to confirm. I want to do something with you now that I want you to take seriously, not as an exercise you observe, but as an experience you inhabit. I am going to ask you to use your imagination in a specific way, and I want you to know that imagination is not the opposite of faith. Imagination is often the language through which faith sees what it cannot yet touch. So stay with me here. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a metaphorical one, but a real and physical one in your mind. A doorway. You can make it whatever kind of door feels true to you. A wooden door worn smooth from years of hands on it. A door at the end of a long hallway that you have been walking toward for years. A door in the middle of an open field, standing alone, inexplicably present. Whatever kind of door your spirit reaches for, stand at it now. Now, look behind you. Not with fear or regret, but with the clear eyes of someone who is far enough from the journey to see the whole of it at once. Look at the terrain you have crossed to get to this threshold. Look at the seasons that seem to have no end. Look at the nights you crossed alone. Look at the places where the path narrowed to almost nothing, and you had to move forward on something smaller than certainty. Look at the moments where you put one foot in front of the other not because you could see the way clearly, but because stopping felt like a worse kind of death than continuing in the dark. Look at all of it, not to relive it, but to see it clearly for what it was. Not failure, not punishment, not divine indifference wearing the costume of a plan. A path, a specific, intentional, purposeful path that led you through everything it needed to lead you through, in order to bring you to exactly the place where you are standing right now. Now look at what you are carrying. Look at your hands. In one hand, you are holding everything the waiting built in you. The depth of compassion that only comes from personal suffering. The quality of discernment that only comes from having been deceived enough times to know the difference between what is real and what is performed. The capacity for patience that only comes from having had your own impatience taken to its and found the other side of it. The ability to sit with someone in their darkness without immediately trying to fix it, because you know what it feels like to need someone to simply stay. All of that is in one hand. It is not light, but it is yours. In the other hand, you are holding the dream. The original one, the one that arrived before the waiting, before the wilderness, before the years of almost. The one that has been compressed and refined by everything it has been through. The way carbon becomes diamond under sufficient pressure and time. It does not look the same as it did when it first arrived. It is smaller in some ways, stripped of the parts that were about your ego or your need for validation, or the timeline you had planned. But in its compressed and refined form, it is more purely itself than it has ever been. It is the truest version of what was always meant to be in your hands. And you are holding it right now. Now look at the door in front of you and notice something. It is already open, not swung wide, not dramatically ajar, but open. A crack of light coming through the edge. Enough light to see by. Enough light to take the next step. The door has been waiting for exactly the person who is standing in front of it right now, carrying exactly what you are carrying in both hands. Not the version of you from 3 years ago who would have tried to walk through it too quickly and with too much to prove. Not the version of you from 5 years ago who would have needed external validation before taking the step. This version. The one who has been through the wilderness. The one who has practiced kava without fully knowing that was what they were doing. The one whose inner frequency has been refined by years of faithful pressure into something that resonates at the exact pitch that this particular door was built to respond to. You are not approaching this threshold. You are already standing at it. You have been standing at it for longer than you realized. The realization that you are here, already here, at the edge of the thing you have been walking toward, is not a future event. It is this moment. This is the threshold, and the step is not something you need to prepare for. The preparation is complete. The step is simply the next natural movement of a person who has already done everything that was required to arrive here. I want to speak some things over you now, not as performance, not as formula, but as genuine words of blessing for the specific person you have become through this specific journey. Receive them not with analysis, but with openness. May the clarity that has been building in your inner world in this season settle into a permanent foundation that does not shift when the circumstances around you are uncertain. May the relationships that are coming into your life in the next chapter carry the quality of being truly known, the kind of knowing that does not require explanation or performance, or the management of someone else's expectations. May the provision that is moving toward you arrive in the exact form that fits what you are actually called to do, not the form you imagined when you were picturing blessing from the outside of your assignment. May the dream in your hand, the refined and compressed and most true version of what was always yours, find the soil it was made for in this next season and grow in ways that exceed what you were able to imagine during the years when imagination felt like a dangerous luxury. May the person you have become through the waiting, the cycle breaker, who stands at this threshold with both hands full of something real and something hard-won, may that person step through to the door they are already standing at with the confidence of someone who knows that the preparation was sufficient, because the one who designed the preparation also designed the assignment and has never made a single error in either. I want to stay at this threshold with you for just a little longer because I know what happens the moment a message like this ends and the ordinary world rushes back in. The phone buzzes. The to-do list reasserts itself. The person in the next room needs something. And all of this, the threshold, the open door, the hands full of something real and hard-won, begins to feel like a beautiful idea you visited briefly rather than a truth you are actually living in. So before we move forward, I want to give you something to anchor this in the practical, something to carry into the rest of your day that is not just emotional residue, but a genuine orientation point. Here is what I want you to do before tonight ends, not tomorrow, tonight. I want you to find a piece of paper or open a note on your phone if that is what you have available, and I want you to write down one sentence in response to this question. What is the one thing I have been waiting for permission to believe about myself that I am choosing to believe right now without waiting for external confirmation? One sentence, not a paragraph, not a list. One sentence that names the truest thing about who you have become in this season. The thing that the waiting built in you, that you have not yet given yourself full permission to claim. You do not have to show it to anyone. You do not have to perform it or announce it. But write it down, because there is something that happens when a chosen one names their own becoming in their own words. It is not the same as hearing it from someone else. It lands differently. It roots differently. It becomes a reference point you can return to in the moments when the noise gets loud again and the old stories try to reassert themselves. And then, after you have written it, I want you to read it out loud once. In whatever room you are in whatever voice you have available, whether it is full and clear or quiet and uncertain. Read it once as a declaration, not as a wish, not as a hope, but as a statement of present reality. Because that is what it is. The becoming is not future tense. It is already accomplished. The cycle breaker standing at the threshold is not a future version of you. It is the version of you that the last several years have been building. And the only thing that has been missing is your own full agreement with what has already been made. There is also something I want to say about the community you are a part of, even if you have never thought of it in those terms. All across the world, in different time zones, in different languages, in different seasons that look very different on the outside but carry the same interior texture, other chosen ones are sitting with this same message right now. Other cycle breakers are standing at their own thresholds. Other people who have carried their dreams through long wilderness seasons are arriving at the same recognition that you are arriving at today. You are not doing this alone. You have never been doing this alone. The aloneness of the waiting season was real, but it was circumstantial, not fundamental. Fundamentally, you are part of a generation of people who are being simultaneously prepared and simultaneously positioned for a shift that is larger than any one of you and requires all of you. When you share this message, when you pass it to someone who needs it, you are not just being generous with a piece of content. You are participating in the gathering. You are being one of the hands through which another chosen one receives the confirmation their spirit has been waiting for. That is not a small thing. That is the cycle breaker, functioning exactly as a cycle breaker does, not hoarding the gift of their own becoming, but turning it immediately outward toward the person behind them, on the path who needs to see that the threshold is real and reachable and already standing open. You are not almost ready. You are not nearly there. You are standing at the threshold of it right now, in this moment, in this breath, with everything you need already in your hands. And the door is open. Type, "I see it" in the comments if you are standing at your threshold today. Let the other chosen ones reading these comments know they are not alone in their arriving. Because sometimes the most powerful thing in a long waiting season is simply seeing someone else say that the door is open, and believing, because they said it, that your door is open too. You are standing at an open door with both hands full of something real, and I want to make sure that before this message ends, you leave with more than a feeling. Feelings are important. They are real and they matter. And the ones you have been experiencing throughout this message are worth honoring. But a feeling without a direction is just weather. It moves through and then it passes. And the person who experienced it is left standing in the same place they were before, slightly warmer for a moment but fundamentally unchanged in their orientation. I do not want that for you. I want you to leave this message with something you can do, something specific, something that belongs to the person you are right now, in the actual circumstances of your actual life, not in some idealized future version of your story where everything is already resolved. So let me give you 3 areas of concrete, practical, immediate action that correspond exactly to the 3 areas of movement I described in the previous section. Because movement without direction scatters, and your energy is too valuable to scatter right now. The first area is your relationships, and the action I want to give you here is one of the simplest and most consistently avoided things that chosen ones in a transitional season can do. I want you to identify one relationship in your life that has been quietly draining you, not dramatically, not with conflict or cruelty, but with a consistent low-level heaviness that you notice every time you finish an interaction with this person. You know which one I am talking about. You have known for a while, and you have been managing it rather than addressing it, because you are a person who values loyalty, who does not give up on people easily, who has been given enough grace yourself that you feel uncomfortable withdrawing it from others. All of those instincts are good instincts. I am not asking you to abandon anyone or to make a dramatic pronouncement or to end something that still has life in it. I am asking you to do something much smaller and in some ways much harder. I am asking you to stop performing energy you do not have in that relationship, to show up honestly rather than managed, to let the connection be what it actually is right now, rather than what you have been working to maintain through the sheer force of your own effort. What often happens when a chosen one stops performing in a draining relationship is one of 2 things. Either the relationship naturally finds a more honest and sustainable level, one that serves both people without requiring one person to carry the entire weight of it, or it reveals that the connection was primarily sustained by your performance and begins to complete itself naturally. Both outcomes are healthier than the current one, and both outcomes create space for the relationships that are coming, space for the connections that will recognize you without requiring you to manage their perception of you. Space for the kind of relational life that a cycle breaker in their next season actually needs, which is depth over volume, honesty over performance, and presence over maintenance. The second area is your purpose, and the action here is the most important one I am going to give you, so I want you to receive it carefully. The question that has been running in the background of your life for months or years. The question that sounds like, what am I supposed to be doing? Or, what is my next step? Or, how do I know which direction to move? That question does not get answered by more thinking. It gets answered by one small, specific, concrete action taken in the direction of what you already know, not in the direction of what you are sure about, not in the direction of what has been confirmed and validated and approved by everyone whose opinion you value, in the direction of what you already know, even if what you know is only a feeling, only a leaning, only a quiet and persistent pull towards something that you have not yet been able to fully justify with logic. I want you to identify one thing, just one thing, that you have been putting off doing because you were waiting for more certainty before you began. One email you have not sent. One conversation you have been rehearsing but not having. One application, one enrollment, one phone call, one creative thing you have been keeping private because it did not feel ready yet. I want you to do that one thing today, not perfectly, not with everything in place, just the first version of it, the rough, honest, and imperfect first version, because the first version is the only version that has the power to generate the second version. Clarity does not precede action for a chosen one in a Kairos season. Clarity follows action. The step creates the sight line, and you have been waiting to see the full path before you take the first step, when the truth is that the path only becomes visible one step at a time, and the first step is the only one you are being asked for right now. Your purpose is not hiding from you. It is not locked behind a revelation you have not yet received or a confirmation you have not yet been given. It is present in the thing you already know, the quiet knowing that has been consistent even when everything else has been uncertain. Take one step toward it today, not a leap, not a full commitment with all the contingencies resolved. One step. And then pay attention to what opens up as a result of that step, because what opens up will tell you where the next step is. The third area is provision and opportunity, and the action here requires a shift in how you have been positioning yourself in relation to what is coming. Many chosen ones in long waiting seasons develop, understandably and reasonably, a posture of bracing. They have been disappointed enough times that they have learned to protect themselves from the pain of expectation by keeping their anticipation low and their guard high. And that protective posture made complete sense in the seasons that produced it. It was a reasonable response to a repeated experience of almost, but a bracing posture, while it protects you from the pain of disappointment, also makes it significantly harder to receive what is actually arriving. You cannot fully open your hands to receive something while your fists are partially closed against the possibility of loss. The practical action I want you to take in this area is this: I want you to do one thing in the next 24 hours that is an act of preparation for what you are expecting to arrive. Not a wishful gesture. A practical act of genuine preparation. If what's coming involves a new professional chapter, update one thing in how you present yourself to the world, one thing that reflects who you are now rather than who you were 2 years ago. If what is coming involves a relational shift, create one intentional space in your week for a new connection to occupy, 1 hour or one afternoon, that you stop filling with busyness and leave genuinely open. If what is coming involves a material shift, do one thing that reflects the stewardship of someone who is expecting to have more to steward. Not from a place of presumption or performance. From a place of genuine alignment between what you believe internally and how you are arranging your life externally. The chosen ones who receive what is coming are not necessarily the ones who believed the hardest, or prayed the longest, or endured the most. They are the ones whose internal posture and external preparation were aligned when the moment arrived. Kairos does not wait for you to get ready. It arrives at its appointed time. And the people who are positioned to receive it are the people who have been living as though they expected it to come, not with blind optimism that ignores reality, but with the grounded and practical expectancy of someone who has done the inner work and is now doing the outer work of being genuinely ready. I want to bring these three actions together and name what they have in common, because there is a thread running through all of them that I do not want you to miss. Every one of these actions requires you to stop waiting for permission. The relationship you need to show up honestly in, you have been waiting for the right moment, the right conversation, the right version of yourself to show up before you stop performing. The purpose step you need to take, you have been waiting for certainty, for confirmation, for the full picture before you move. The preparation for provision, you have been waiting for evidence of its arrival before you begin to arrange your life around receiving it. In every area, the waiting has been for permission that was never going to come from outside. The permission was always internal, and it has been available this entire time. You are the authority over your own next step, not the circumstances, not the people whose validation you have been seeking, not the timeline that has not cooperated with your plans. You, the cycle breaker, standing at the open door with both hands full of something real, the one who has been through the wilderness and come out of it, carrying things that cannot be bought or borrowed or given by anyone who has not been through their own version of the same terrain. You have the authority to take the next step. You have had it all along, and today is the day you use it. I want to close this section with something simple and direct. In every era, in every generation, the people who changed the trajectory of what was possible were not the people who waited until they were fully ready. They were the people who took the next honest step from wherever they were standing, with whatever they were carrying, in whatever condition they found themselves on the day the step was required. You are standing in that day right now. The step is the action. The action is already within your reach. And everything that has been built in you through the years of waiting is more than sufficient for the step that is in front of you today. Type "I receive" in the comments if you are committing to one of these three actions today. Not as a performance, as a record, as a moment of public agreement with your own readiness. Let the other chosen ones in this community witness your step, because witness matters, and because your step might be the exact thing that gives someone else the courage to take theirs. We have been on a long walk together, you and I, and we are almost at the end of it. Not the end of your story, not the end of what is unfolding in your life, but the end of this particular conversation, this particular hour of sitting together in the honest and tender and sometimes difficult territory of what it means to be a chosen one in the middle of a season that has asked more of you than you expected to give. And before I say anything else, I want to thank you, not in the polished and formulaic way that content creators thank their audiences for watching, in the specific and genuine way that comes from understanding what it cost you to be here, because you did not arrive at this message effortlessly. Something in you had to decide again to show up, had to choose again to stay open, had to resist again the very reasonable and very understandable temptation to close off from the kind of hope that has disappointed you before. And that decision, that quiet choosing to stay open one more time, is not a small thing. It is the thing It is the most important thing you have done all day, and possibly one of the most important things you have done in a long time. I see you. Not the version of you that performs well under pressure. Not the version of you that has it together in the ways that other people can see. I see the version of you that showed up here, in this hour, carrying what you have been carrying from a season that has required more endurance than anyone around you fully understands. That version is the real one. And that version is the one I have been speaking to this entire time. I want you to know something about the people who have found their way to this message alongside you. Right now, all across the world, in living rooms and parked cars and quiet offices and crowded commuter trains, other chosen ones are arriving at this same place in this same message. They carry different stories, different geographies, different languages and different losses, and different specific shapes of the dream they have been holding through their wilderness. But the interior texture of their experience is the same as yours. The same quiet frustration of being further along on the inside than the outside can currently show. The same grief of relationships that did not survive the waiting. The same erosion and then gradual rebuilding of trust in their own perception. The same frequency, refined through the same kind of pressure, now ready for the same kind of activation. You are not sitting alone in this. You have never been sitting alone in this. And the community of chosen ones who are walking into their Kairos moment in this same season is larger and more diverse and more collectively powerful than any one of you can see from your individual vantage point. That matters because what cycle breakers do is not only personal. What you are stepping into is not only about your own healing and your own fulfillment and your own unlived potential finally finding its expression. It is about the people who will be reached by the version of you that comes through the door you are already standing at. It is about the ones who are still in the middle of their wilderness, the ones who have not yet found the language for what they are going through, the ones who will one day sit in a conversations or read a message or hear a story and recognize themselves in it. And that recognition will be the thing that keeps them from giving up on the final stretch of their own journey. That recognition will come through you, through your story, through the specific and hard one, an unrepeatable testimony of a person who went through exactly what they went through and came out of it carrying something real. This is why sharing this message matters. Not because I need the reach, not because the algorithm rewards it, but because there is a chosen one somewhere in your contact list, somewhere in your sphere of influence, somewhere in the quiet edges of your life who is in their midnight hour right now and does not have anyone to name it for them. They woke up this morning in the middle of a season that has no visible end and went through their day, performing the version of themselves that other people expect to see. And tonight they are going to sit down in the quiet and feel the full weight of another day that did not bring the evidence they have been waiting for. And if you share this message, there is a chance that it finds them tonight, that it gives them the language, that it names the wilderness for what it is and gives them the frame of Kava and Kairos and the open door and the cycle break standing at the threshold, that it keeps them holding on through one more night. That one more night might be the night before their morning. You have the power to do that for someone today, not with your own eloquence or your own wisdom or your own perfectly resolved story, just by passing on what was passed to you. That is all. Like and share this message today, not for me, but so that it can reach another chosen one who is walking into their week without anyone to name it for them. Subscribe so that when the next message arrives, you are already in the room. And if you are in a position to support this work financially, to help, make sure these messages can keep reaching the people who need them. Your contribution matters more than its dollar amount suggests. It is not a transaction. It is a participation. It is your way of saying that this kind of work deserves to continue, and you want to be part of the reason it does. Now, I want to give you one final practice before I let you go, and this one is not about adding something to your life. It is about putting something down. Because I know that alongside everything else you have been carrying in this season, there has been a particular weight that has nothing to do with external circumstances and everything to do with what you have been telling yourself about those circumstances. The stories, the interpretations, the meaning you have assigned to the delays and the closed doors and the seasons that stretched longer than you planned. Some of those stories have served you. Some of them have been protective and necessary and have helped you survive seasons that required surviving. But some of them are no longer true, and you have been carrying them past their expiration date because no one gave you permission to set them down. So I am giving you that permission now. I want you to picture yourself standing at that threshold we visited earlier, the open door with the light coming through the edge. And in your hands, alongside everything real and hard-won that you are carrying, I want you to picture the weight of the old stories. The story that says you are behind. The story that says you missed something irretrievable. The story that says the dream was too large, or too specific, or too impossible for someone with your history and your particular combination of limitations and losses. The story that says you are almost ready but not quite. The story that says next season, next year, next version of yourself will be the one that finally gets to step through the door. I want you to take all of those stories and I want you to set them down at the threshold. Literally, in your imagination, bend down and place them on the ground. Not throw them away. Not perform some dramatic release that you do not actually feel. Just set them down, gently, with the same care you have given to everything else in this season. And then straighten up and look at your hands and notice that they are still full of everything real and true and hard-won that belongs to you. The compassion, the discernment, the endurance, the dream, compressed and refined, and more purely itself than it has ever been. None of that went with the stories you set down. It never came from the stories. It came from the actual living, and the actual living is yours to keep. Now take one step across the threshold, not in some future moment when everything is finally aligned. Now, in this breath, with this decision, the step does not have to be large. It does not have to be certain. It only has to be honest. One honest step in the direction of the life that has been waiting for the version of you that the wilderness built. That is all that is being asked. And now I want to mention something one final time, without pressure and without urgency, because if it is for you, then it is already resonating, and it does not need to be sold. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if the section about theta frequencies and gamma states and the science of the 7 minutes landed somewhere specific in you, if you felt a recognition in that part of the conversation that went beyond intellectual interest into something more personal, then it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below this video. The link is there. The 90-day guarantee is real, and the $39 access point is available for a limited time. If it is a yes in your spirit, follow the yes. If today is not the day, that is also a complete answer. I trust you to know the difference. What I want to leave you with, more than any product, and more than any practice, and more than any framework or concept or piece of language I have given you today, is this. You came into this message as a chosen one who was carrying something real through a season that had asked too much for too long. You are leaving it as something more specific than that. You are leaving it as a cycle breaker who has been named and witnessed and seen in the fullness of what the waiting has built, who is standing at an open door with both hands full of something that no one can take from you, who has been given a framework for understanding time that makes the past make sense and the present feel possible and the future feel genuinely near. You are leaving it with 3 practices and 3 areas of action and a community of other chosen ones who are standing at their own thresholds in their own parts of the world in this same season. You are not alone. You were never alone, and the aloneness that the wilderness required was not the whole story. It was the chapter before the gathering, and the gathering has already begun. Go now. Take the step. Set the stories down at the threshold and walk through the door that has been standing open, waiting specifically for you, for longer than either of us can fully measure. The world on the other side of it is not perfect. It is not a place without challenge or cost or further growth required. But it is the place where your full self is finally allowed to operate at full capacity. And that place has been waiting for you with the same faithfulness with which you have been waiting for it.